It's time for Colony Kids. It's time for Colony Kids. It's time for Colony Kids. Good afternoon, Davy. How are you today? Oh, hi, Mr. Goliath. Is everything okay? No, everything is awful. My parents are unfair. Unfair? That doesn't sound like your parents, Davy. Well, it's true. They started giving my baby sister an allowance, and now she gets the same allowance I get. Well, how is that unfair, Davy? I have to unload the dishwasher every day, change the litter boxes, and keep my room clean, or I don't get my allowance. Okay, tell me more, Davy. Sally only has to keep her room clean. That's it. She doesn't have any other chores, and yet she gets the same amount of money. I should get more. I work harder than she does. So, your parents are able to give you an allowance each week. That's really nice of them. I earned that money. You did? You have a job, Davy? Mr. Goliath, you aren't listening. I have to unload the dishwasher every day, clean out the litter boxes, which is a really stinky job, and keep my room clean. So you have to help keep the house your parents pay for. You have to take care of the dishes that held the food that your parents paid for and cooked, and keep the room you live in clean. That doesn't sound unfair, Davy. But Sally only has to keep her room clean, and she gets the same amount of money I do. Well, Sally is younger than you. Can she even reach the cabinets where the dishes go? Well, no. And what would happen if she tried to clean the litter boxes? Oh, she'd make a mess. She can't even pick up the clean litter. But Mr. Goliath, that's not the point. You think you deserve more money than she does because you do more work than she does. Yes! You think you earned that money. Now you understand. Did you hear the story about the people working in the field who worked for 12 hours and received the same pay as those who's only worked 2? What? That's not fair, Mr. Goliath. That's exactly what the people who worked in the field for 12 hours said. But the man who hired them said, "Remember, I told you I would pay you this amount of money, and that's what I paid you." He promised $100, and he paid them $100 just as he promised. And the people who only worked like 2 hours also got $100? Yes, and the man who hired them said he had a right to be generous with his money. But that's still not fair. It's like Sally getting the same allowance I get. Yes, it is, just like that. Your parents don't have to give you an allowance. They choose to. I bet even if you had no allowance, you would still have to unload the dishes, clean the litter boxes, and keep your room clean. But your parents choose to give you an allowance, just as they are choosing to give Sally an allowance. I suppose. I know Walnut has to keep his room clean, load and unload the dishes, and he doesn't get any allowance at all. Exactly. Your parents are being generous with you and Sally, but they don't have to be generous, do they? I guess not. If they asked me to keep my room clean, I'd still do it, because I'm supposed to obey my parents. Exactly. God's forgiveness is the same way. Huh? Will God choose us to forgive us? when we are really disobedient and when we are only a little disobedient. He doesn't have to forgive, but God chooses to forgive us. God is generous with forgiveness, just like your parents are generous when they give you an allowance. I guess. But that still doesn't sound fair. You're right, but I like the idea that God is not fair. Huh? If God were fair, he'd probably give up on us. We are always messing up. Look at the world around us. We make war, we cheat, we steal. And God says, I love you even when we don't love our neighbor. I guess you're right. I'm glad God forgives us, but I'm still unhappy about Sally's allowance. I understand. I'd probably feel the same way, Davy. Really? Yes, Davy, really. Oh, I better get home. I still have to unload the dishes before dinner tonight. Bye, Mr. Goliath. Bye, Davy.